This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
This is Lauren Lester, the voice of Robin and Nightwing.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review.
Hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com.
And on your favorite podcast app.
Gotham City is out of control.
An entire city screaming in fear.
Supervillains walk the streets, preying on the innocent.
They will learn the true nature of power.
The police are powerless. A creature prowls this urban wasteland.
What is that?
He moves in darkness. For some, he is a rumor, a name whispered in the corridors of the underworld, waiting for the chance to strike. Let every criminal know the acid taste of fear.
You crazy! Bat! Giant bat!
Gotham has forgotten what justice means. The Dark Knight is here to remind them. Who are you? Batman. Good guys wear black.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 228 of the DCAU Review. I am Liam, and with me, as he always is Cal. Cal, we are wrapping up this month of September, but rather than a regular Batman the Animated Series episode review, we are going back to an old favorite, so to speak, here, as we are bringing you yet another character spotlight episode this week. And we've got some big anniversaries to mark with this choice for a character spotlight.
We sure do, Liam. As you mentioned, we are celebrating this month the 30th anniversary of Batman the Animated Series, which means that in theory, then, any character that made its debut in Batman the Animated Series would also likely be celebrating a number similar to that. And wouldn't you know it, probably one of DC's most popular intellectual properties of the last decade or so, and somebody who certainly has been pushed to the front, especially in their in various versions of their live action media. I would say over the last 8 years or so, maybe shorter than that, 6 years, 8 years, is a character that, wouldn't you know it, not only created by the same people responsible for Batman the Animated Series, but thus made her debut during the Batman the Animated Series. In case you haven't figured it out, if you haven't read the title of the episode yet, we're doing a DC character spotlight on one Harley Quinzel, aka Harley Quinn. That's right, celebrating her 30th anniversary since her debut way back on September the 11th, 1992. Yeah, man, 30 years from the day that she appeared in her first episode of Batman the Animated Series. So if you haven't heard one of our spotlight episodes before, what we're going to do is, this is just volume one of Harley. She's got a lot of appearances in the DCAU, obviously beyond just the Batman Animated Series. Her appearances continued up and including the new Batman adventures, and made some appearances in Superman, and even later on in some of the tie-in movies, and has up to recently is one of the more recent appearances in DCAU continuity tie-in films. So she's still making appearances today, but we're going to be dealing with just some of her initial appearances in Batman the Animated Series here in volume one, and we'll leave some of those later appearances for another time.
Absolutely, yeah. We kind of kept it to what is, as we've been talking about the last few weeks. We've just completed the first 65 episodes of Batman the Animated Series were considered the first season. That was the initial episode order that they got from Fox Kids at the time. Imagine just getting an order for 65 episodes of a show right off the bat. I don't think that happens in children's television or regular television anymore. But yes, as you as with that capper, as we've reached the end of that first season and have broken into the later half, or the later third, I guess it would be, or fourth of the remaining BTAS episodes we had, we thought we would cap it at those first 65 episodes and look at Harley's appearances within that first season. And she has quite a few memorable ones, Cal. Of course, as you mentioned, created for this series by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm. As the story goes, as has been told and retold hundreds and hundreds of times, probably by Mr. Dini especially, is that he had such an affinity for the old Adam West Batman series, and a lot of those episodes, the Joker or the Riddler, whoever the villain was of the week, would have like a hench girl in their crew, and they would have some sort of gimmick name that was sort of representative of whatever villain they were working for. So he kind of took that to heart, and at the same time also sort of had his friend Arlene Sorkin in mind, as he recalled that she had years earlier on an episode of Days of Our Lives, in some sort of trippy dream sequence, had played a court jester in a scene. And so kind of marrying that together, Paul Dini's brilliant mind with Bruce Timm's artistic flair, and then of course you add in what is, as Bruce Timm referred to her, Harley's mom, Arlene Sorkin, as the voice actress, and also someone who gave a lot of the personality that became second nature to Harley as she continued to make appearances come on. So those three came together for the first time in the episode Joker's Favor, Harley's very first appearance in any media, on September 11, 1992. And while she isn't the main player in that episode, certainly, and there were certainly some things ironed out. This is long before Mad Love, where we knew about this sort of deeper, darker connection to the Joker. But here in just her first outing, not only does she, we get introduced to her and her costume and her way of speaking, but she also gets to play dress up and put a bomb on Commissioner Gordon's lapel and dress up as a cop and give a couple of one-liners to Harvey Bullock, who's being a bit lascivious at the time. So, while she is definitely not the main focus of that episode, she does make a memorable first appearance here.
Here's to Gotham's Commissioner G. You lock up the weirdos, the crooks, and the geeks. You're a hero to all the boys in blue. But this time, baby, the joke's on you.
Absolutely. And not just because her appearance is directly responsible for what we have dubbed one of, if not the single greatest line in Batman the Animated Series, where the Joker is putting together this plan. The whole plot revolves around him seeking revenge against Commissioner Gordon, and there's this ceremony that they're having to honor Commissioner Gordon. So they're going to break in and sort of sabotage everything and kill not only Commissioner Gordon, but the mayor and other politicians as well. But we get the famous, especially here on the DCAU, look at the size of that cake man exclamation, delivered only the way that Mark Hamill could. And it's tremendous, absolutely fantastic. And without her, the Joker was upset that this Charlie was expecting Harley to push the cake all by herself, when look at and open the door at the same time. That she can't do both at the same time. Think.
Okay, Chaz. When Harley knocks on the door 3 times, you open it.
And?
That's it.
Wait, that's a favor? You called me here just to open a door?
Well, look at the size of that cake, man. She can't open the door and push it in all at once. Think.
But yes, besides that, there's quite some memorable moments there, and Harley doesn't get as many comedic moments in that she's not the butt of the joke, and there's not the dynamic of the sort of abusive relationship that the Joker and Harley have as much in that episode. So she's very much just sort of played off as a lackey for the Joker, and as you mentioned, her her role of placing the bomb directly on Commissioner Gordon looms large as she impersonates a police officer and even has a chance to dole out some justice to a very misogynistic Harvey Bullock as well in that same scene. So yes, it's to me, I think what is interesting is that this adds another dynamic to the Joker character. And initially, you think Batman, of course, has Robin to bounce dialogue off of and to be the comedic foil. But if you have the Joker, who is a comedic character himself, he doesn't quite have a sidekick with which to trade barbs with or to hand things off traditionally. So this really gave him an opportunity to have somebody there in his corner, a femme fatale. And in early on here, I think just created an extra layer to that Joker character. And what's interesting is that's what it did initially, but then as we'll talk about, Harley very much developed into her own separate character and has continued to do so some 30 years later.
That's right, Cal. And if you're interested in hearing our full review of that episode, you can go back to episode 36 of our show, where we reviewed Joker's Favor in full, gave our full scores there. But moving on from there, Cal, our next appearance for Harley in this first season of Batman the Animated Series. Man, the hits just keep coming when you get to The Laughing Fish, one of the all-time great and most beloved episodes of this series, obviously based on some comics from the 70s by Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, but sort of mashed together and given that Paul Dini je ne sais quoi. And as you have this ridiculous plot of the Joker using his Joker toxin to make all of the fish have these big hideous grins on their face, and then trying to copyright the fish and seeking bloody revenge on the copyright office that refuses to grant him his wish. And in the process, while again Harley not the star of this episode, I think we begin to develop that comedic timing, not only in the writing style or in some of the physical comedy that we see on screen as we get to in this episode, but also that interplay between, of course, Mark Hamill as the Joker and Arlene Sorkin as Harley really starts to I think come together here.
Oh, absolutely. We get so much from the filming of the Joker fish commercial and her admission that she hates the taste of fish. And
They're funny and funny and oh so delish. They're joyful and jolly Joker fish.
Say, Mom, wondering what to feed the family tonight?
What'll I feed the family tonight?
Arr, try me famous Joker fish. They're smiling smelt, giggling grouper, and happy haddock.
This could cause a stampede to pork.
Yummy, yum, yum. Eat it.
Mr. J, I have this little problem with fish. Yummy, yum, yum.
Yes, friends, that's Joker fish. Tasty, tempting, and of course,
Naturally low in cholesterol.
coming to your local store just as soon as that nasty old Mr. G. Carl Francis decides to give me my legal cut of the profits.
not only do we get that the voices playing off each other, but we begin to develop more of who Harley is, what her relationship to the Joker is, how abusive he is to her, and how she's just sort of the butt of the joke, regardless of the fact that she clearly is endeared to this man, that he's not so endeared to her that he won't make her the laughing stock for him or for his fellow henchmen. So or his other henchmen outside of Harley. So yeah, there's a lot that's played on that. I think famously when he jams her inside the fish costume also is another joke, as she claims that she wants to be a mermaid, so he makes her half fish, but it's just the top half that she ends up being a fish. So
If this lunch meat figured out where we are, Batman won't be far behind. And why spoil my sharky's appetite when I can feed him bigger fish?
fish. And no offense, Mr. J.
Poor Harley. This caper's been kind of rough on you, hasn't it?
Uh-huh.
Cheer up! You can be my very own little mermaid.
Oh! You're really sick, you know that, boss.
It's quite the laugh. That episode, which is episode 81 in the archives, both at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app. But Liam, yeah, that's one I believe. Don't quote me on this. Actually, quote me on it. I'm almost certain that ended up being a perfect score from myself. That was a very highly ranked episode from my recollection from both of us. It's a classic for so many reasons. But yeah, I think when it comes to Harley, you begin to understand that dynamic, that she's not only Joker's lackey and that she's goes along with these ridiculous plans, but you begin to see that, that it's a relationship that is very much one-sided, that Harley cares for Joker and has more than just a peer-to-peer villain relationship going on here, that she really is sort of infatuated with him, but he does not treat her with respect or love in return. So you lay the foundation for what's going to be laid out later on in some of the episodes that we talk about going forward. But yeah, you get some great comedy between the two characters, and you flesh out a little bit of just who this Harley character is, and that's just in her second appearance.
Absolutely. And it's the Joker throwing the fish head on her, and the visual of just her eyes peering out of the mouth of the fish head and telling the Joker, "You're really sick, you know that, boss."
Yeah.
It's fantastic. It's the delivery of some of those lines in that episode
and he cackles he cackles at her saying that. So
yes, his enjoyment of other people, even Harley's pain, is on full display in that episode for sure. And from there, other than a quick cameo appearance in Joker's Wild, where we see her picture in like a group of files and news clippings about the Joker, and then of course I believe some of the waitresses at the Joker's Wild casino are dressed like her, but not a full appearance there. But we're marking down all of them, even the minor ones, just to be really nitpicky here. Yeah, if you wanted to hear us break down Joker's Wild in more detail, of course you could head over to episode 94 of the podcast, which, as Cal said, you can hear on your favorite podcast app, on the Pod Tower YouTube channel, or at DCAUreview.com. Not much actual Harley in there, but she's there. So
yeah, she's visually, her visual is there, at least. As you mentioned, there's a scene where Batman's sort of flipping through a book that the owner of this casino has. He's looking through the owner of this casino's files, and he happens upon a collection of photographs and things that he's collected to sort of base this casino on. The whole idea being he's created this casino using the Joker's likeness in an attempt for the Joker to get angry enough to blow up the casino in order for him to be able to get the insurance money. But yeah, not Harley, other than some of the waitresses and people working in the casino and the photograph dressed as Harley, we don't get an actual appearance from Harley, nor do we get any Arlene Sorkin for this episode.
Yes. Although ironically, as we'll talk about in a little bit here, it does set up like a bit of an antagonistic relationship between Poison Ivy and the Joker, which will come into play a little bit later in the season there. But from there, we go to just an all-time classic, maybe the all-time classic episode of the series, if you're asking a lot of people. That is, of course, Almost Got Him, the absolute epic tale of all of the biggest villains in Gotham City surrounding a card table as they recount different stories of almost offing the Batman before he was able to get away. And while it seems like Harley is going to be reduced to a very minor cameo once again as sort of Joker's Ed McMahon in his talk show segment that we get, his Andy Richter, if probably a more That's also not a current reference. Conan's show's been over for 2 years. I'm sorry.
Whoever
I'm
Jimmy
30.
Fallon's guy is that he plays off of.
Yeah, you know that guy. He has glasses, I think.
Yeah, the guy that used to be a writer for SNL. I don't know. Do people watch talk shows anymore? I don't
Right.
know.
It's Late Night Gotham Live! And here's the man who puts a smile on your face, whether you want it or not, the Joker!
Well, anyway, Harley, you might think that Harley is only once again getting a bit part, but actually, once Batman reveals himself and the rest of the Gotham police force comes in to capture all of the crooks, that leaves Harley by herself with Catwoman all tied up, and she's preparing to turn her mince her into cat food as Batman arrives to try to stop her. So we kind of, even though that episode's all about kind of the biggest and the baddest of the bad when it comes to Batman's rogues gallery, Harley kind of ends up being like our little epilogue final boss.
Yeah, she, as you mentioned, she makes in Joker's story where he's telling all about what's going on. We do get a little bit of her reading out of the phone book, which is, it's a joke. They pumped laughing gas into the studio audience, so everything is funny and making them laugh.
But for a real demonstration, we're pumping our studio audience full of my patented laughing gas. These yahoos laugh at anything now, even the phone book.
Marvin Abbott, 555-8976. Gerald Adams, 555-9011. MJ Addison, 555.
Batman is strapped to this chair that is going to shock him with it's called the laugh-o-meter. So the electricity increases based on, you know what? When you say this out loud, this sounds really much a lot like a Batman 66 plot. I'm just going to throw that out there. You know? So they strap to an electric chair that is powered by laughter, and he pumps the studio audience full of laughing gas. And so Harley begins to demonstrate that just about anything is funny by reading names out of the phone book. So that's quite amusing. She does manage to escape though, as Catwoman shows up attempting to foil Batman or the Joker's plan rather for killing Batman, and manages to do so. But we get sort of the end of the story interrupted before we find out what's happened, only, as you mentioned, for it to be revealed she's taken Catwoman to a kitty food factory. Again, she's on a conveyor belt, a very Batman 66 style ending, as she's moments away from being torn to shreds by a rotating saw. But Batman, of course, manages to break in, stop the saw, save the girl, and then is in hot pursuit of Harley and able to capture her at the end there. So again, not a whole lot, but as you mentioned, she ends up sort of being the ultimate battle at the end there, and the person responsible for almost offing one of Batman's dearest love interests. So you do get a little bit of a sense that while she may not be considered amongst Gotham's criminals as an equal to sit at the table and to play a game of poker with them, she certainly is rather quite formidable, and trust the Joker trusted her enough to be responsible for offing Catwoman as revenge. So yeah, we get a little bit of the dynamic added to that character there, but there's not much for her to do in an episode that's remembered for a lot more than the ending part there.
Yeah, it does have maybe in an episode that's chock full of some great one-liners and funny bits. The moment where he sort of grabs her and she asks him, if is he gonna kick her around or save Catwoman, and then he notices there's a circuit breaker right next to him, and he just switches it off, and she very much like a Daffy Duck cartoon or something. You just hear her go, help, and then it kind of cuts as you hear like a punch sound effect. It's a yeah, there's some very good comedic stuff for her to do, even in a minor role there. And of course, if you wanted to hear our full review of that one, I really recommend you go back and listen to that one if you haven't heard it. Back in episode 131, it wasn't just Cal and I along for the ride. We also had best friend of the show, Monica Kubina, along with us for that one. Had an absolute blast talking with her, and the way Monica breaks down like the visual style of that episode is so cool. It's like one of my favorite things we've ever done on our show.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's you kind of just have to hear it to appreciate it. But somebody who professionally works with colors and color palettes and artwork, a professional comic book artist breaking down some of the visuals and the choices that the artist made for this episode. It's really fascinating. And if you're a nerd like us, it's you'll be in heaven, because we were. It was great.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely one of my favorite episodes we've ever done. And speaking of favorite episodes of Batman the Animated Series, again, just heavyweight contender after heavyweight contender here. An episode again that not only doesn't really focus that much on Harley, but does focus on and even doesn't really focus on the Joker that much. But another classic Paul Dini written tale, The Man Who Killed Batman. It was the sort of low rent would-be thug Sid the Squid seemingly has accidentally offed the Dark Knight and is sort of Forrest Gumping himself through a night of Gotham City's underworld, and even eventually runs afoul of the Joker and Harley. And I mean, the Hall of Fame moment of this episode is the kazoo playing, right?
You know what's great about you, Puddin'? You really put the fun in funeral.
Dear friends, today is the day the clown cried. And he cries not for the passing of one man, but for the death of a dream. The dream that he would someday taste the ultimate victory over his hated enemy. For it was the Batman who made me the happy soul I am today. How I agonized over the perfect way to thank him for that. Perhaps with a cyanide pie in the face. Or an exploding whoopee cushion playfully planted in the Batmobile. But those dreams were dashed by the Weasley little gunsel sitting there in our midst.
Oh, absolutely. It's the fake tears to start the Batman funeral as they drop a pine box with a cowl in it, because that's all that Sid managed to get when he quote unquote offed the Batman, was he grabbed him by the cape and his cowl ripped off of Batman's body as he seemingly fell to his doom. So as Sid brings the cape and cowl to the Joker, and they have this mock funeral of a casket or a coffin rather being ridden down a conveyor belt into a barrel of acid. We get it's not only some crocodile tears from Harley, but as you mentioned, as the conveyor belt begins to move and Joker is delivering quite the eulogy, she begins playing a kazoo, playing taps, playing amazing. It's amazing.
Yes,
Grace.
It's sort of structured to like Spock's funeral at the end of one of those Star Trek movies.
There you go.
the Chinese.
Yeah, it's incredible. Again, not a whole lot for her to do for the episode, but those 2 points, very, very well executed, very comedic, giving that sick edge of humor that is so associated with the Joker, and seeing that it's not limited to him, that it's sort of rubbed off on Harley, and she has her own sick, demented sense of humor that way as well. And especially immediately after when Sid is kicked into the coffin as it begins rolling down the conveyor belt, we get more kazoo played. And yeah, it's great. There's some great moments there in what is a small appearance from her, but certainly memorable.
It has one moment, which the kazoo, which you've already mentioned, which is worth talking about because as the story goes, I think this is in the Batman animated book that was done by Paul Dini and Chip Kidd several years ago. Unfortunately, it's no longer in print, but I think there's a story in that book about that Arlene Sorkin is actually playing the kazoo in that scene, and she actually got that rendition of Amazing Grace in one take, and everyone was very thankful that she was able to nail it in one take, because they didn't think that anyone would be able to keep from laughing if she had to do it a second time, because of just how funny it is.
Yeah.
And then that, and of course the immortal line of you really put the fun in funeral, I think is an all-time great line for Harley there.
Absolutely. And if you're interested in checking out that review, we did that one on episode 152 of the DCAU reviews. So check that out. Well worth it. And definitely one of the classic episodes of Batman the Animated Series that features a little bit of Harley Quinn that's equally memorable.
Absolutely, Cal. And from there, we move on to really a real big important episode, not just for Harley, not just for the series, but for like DC Comics as a whole. And that is the first ever pairing of Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy in the aptly titled Harley and Ivy. Not only is it our real first chance of seeing Harley outside of even though the Joker is part of this story, it's the plot of the episode is that she and the Joker kind of have their first big falling out, at least the first that we've seen anyway. And she kind of strikes out on her own, and she and Ivy prove to be kind of this incredibly formidable Thelma and Louise style crime duo, and it kind of leaves the Joker like this hapless, like divorced dad trying to take care of the hyenas and the rest of the thugs in his hideout, and he's he can't find his clothes. He's in like a wife beater and his boxers, and it's so much fun for that reason. But obviously the Harley and Ivy pairing, to say the least, it's like you talk about one of the most important decisions made by this series as what came down to, hey, wouldn't it be fun to team Harley up with another, female villain in this series? And now it's, now they're a big money couple and duo in DC Comics for the cartoons, for potentially in movies, and certainly in the comics as well.
Yeah, who'da thunk that that pairing would lead to not only a relatively memorable episode, an important episode not only for the series, but ultimately, like you said, for DC Comics' future, as we've seen tie-in comics, and we'll mention in a little bit, but we won't mention those comics because it's not quite, we haven't quite advanced there. It's probably volume 2, but you get a Harley and Ivy tie-in comic eventually. You have even the current Harley Quinn animated series. Their relationship is blossomed into a romantic relationship. So that's been one of the sort of the paramount relationships and pairings for DC over the last decade. And certainly with the popularity of Harley growing, choosing that to pair them together just seems so natural and second nature. But realizing that it all started with this episode, and a fun one at that, as you mentioned, lots of funny bits as they sort of become a pair by accident, as they both end up robbing the same museum, I think it is, and then because of that and needing to escape together, they get in the same car and they end up going back to Ivy's, where Ivy's staying, and there's some comedy that happens there as Harley and Ivy begin this crime spree that they go on, and they're gaining a lot of recognition. As you mentioned, the Joker is getting more and more frustrated that Harley isn't there and wants to know just kind of where she is. And once he finds out that she's been paired up with Ivy, you start to see the Joker begin to be manipulative and attempt to woo her back. And it's this struggle that Harley is having between recognizing that he's abusive and manipulative and really feeling like maybe he's changed his ways and he really does want her and maybe she should go back. And
I remember when I would go driving like this with Mr. J. Mr. J, Mr. J.
Oh, change the record, Harl. You want to be some wacko's victim the rest of your life?
Mr. J?
Harley?
Hi, Puddin'. You still angry with me?
Honey, baby, pumpkin pie. You know I can't hold a grudge. Where are you?
With a friend. Look, I can't talk, but I wanted to let you know I'm okay. Oops, gotta go. I'll talk to you soon.
Sooner than you think.
Ultimately, that leads to the Joker crashing their party at Ivy's lair, and we get a culmination that ultimately ends up with the three of them having a fight with Batman in the midst of it. So, yeah, there's a lot in that episode that's funny and that ends up being some seminal moments for the character. But I think overall it's memorable, not only for the pairing, but really letting Harley stand out on her own. Even though she has Ivy as a supporting character for the episode, you really learn a lot about this relationship. And even though Harley seemingly brings back the Joker, and we see, her regrettably get back into a relationship with him and lead him right to the house where they're staying, she once again asserts her independence as she and Ivy attempt to break away. But we know that this isn't the end of Joker and Harley being paired together. But yeah, it's a fun episode. There's lots of comedy in the episode, some comedic things happening, especially when Ivy begins forcing Harley to be a vegetarian and giving her immunity shots so that she isn't affected by the toxins on the land that they're staying. So yeah, there's some good memorable stuff here. Not first and foremost though, I think the pairing is obviously the most impactful thing about this episode.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a really fun one. It's our first chance to see Harley, as we said, kind of like in Almost Got Him, where we see her kind of on her own for a bit. It's really fun to just see her paired with another character besides the Joker. So it's kind of fun to see that dynamic set up here. And obviously, like you said, it would blossom, flower pun, very much intended, into quite a bit more as the years went on. But yeah, this is kind of the starting point from that, and it's a big deal. And if you'd like to hear our review of that episode,
you can tune in to episode 179 of the DCAU review, Liam, if you want to hear that full review. And so not that long ago, it was last October, so just about a year ago. But yeah, well worth checking out. There's some good Joker moments in there too, but if you're looking for a Harley centric episode and delving into the psyche of Harley and really learning a little bit more about her, the way that she feels about the Joker, but beginning to have this conflict of recognizing that he's really abusive to her, and Ivy is doing her best to try and open her eyes to that. We begin to kind of first see her realization that this is an unhealthy type of relationship, even if she ends up sort of going back to him at the end.
Absolutely, yeah. It's major for a lot of different things as we've laid out there, and it's also just a really fun episode. Like you said, the the comedy really hits there between the sort of the odd couple pairing of Poison Ivy and Harley, and then, like we said, the Harley and Joker stuff of them sort of fighting like the old married couple and all that. It's a lot of fun as well. So there's a lot of enjoyment to be had in that episode, even beyond what it sort of went on to create. And from there, we move all the way to the last episode of the first season, that being an episode we reviewed just a couple of weeks ago in episode 226 of our show. That would be the Worry Men. And once again, this is not a major appearance, but it is worth noting that among the sort of the marionette puppets that the Mad Hatter sort of sticks on Batman, all with various deadly weapons attached to them, not only is there a Riddler and a Penguin and a Joker in the box, but there's also a very memorable sequence there as Batman is contending with a Harley Quinn marionette.
Yes, so we know that she's at least moved up in the pecking order here to be considered a one of Batman's formidable foes. Is the effigies that the Mad Hatter chooses to create or have his minions create. We're not sure who creates these things. We're just guessing here. I choose to think that the Mad Hatter was up late at night sewing costumes together in order to create more accurate versions of these robots and or mannequins. But we amongst a Penguin and Riddler effigy, as well as in the background we see Mr. Freeze and Clayface and the Joker in the box, as you already mentioned. We get a marionette puppet of Harley Quinn. So now that episode was of course directed by Paul Dini, so very, very possible that Mr. Dini just wanted to insert his proud creation into the episode, but it fits well. No vocals or anything like that. It's simply just a marionette puppet that assumes the same likeness and costume as one Harley and Quinzel. But yeah, Liam, I think if anything, it just made the statement that this is a character that is in the upper echelon of Batman baddies. And certainly while this marionette puppet ultimately was foiled, at least for a moment, it seems like it may be as deadly as Harley. So yeah, we get a little bit of fun there, and I think just elevation of her status as amongst the baddest of the bads in the Rogues Gallery.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a really fun sequence in an episode we just recently talked about. But a lot of fun to see her mixed in there with some of the other more recognizable Rogues Gallery from the series. And Cal, so that will wrap up our first season as far as her televised appearances go. However, Harley Quinn also made her way into several of the DCAU tie-in books. Specifically, we'll be looking at a couple of her appearances from Batman Adventures, Volume 1 here. Most famously, of course, perhaps being Batman Adventures, or should we say Batgirl Adventures, number 12, where once again she's not only paired with Poison Ivy, but we also see a pre the events of Shadow of the Bat, Barbara Gordon dressing up as Batgirl for a costume party and foiling Harley and Ivy's plans. That issue is of course written by the great Kelly Puckett, and with art with one of the great DCAU tie-in artists, Mike Parabeck, and actually inks by Rick Burchett. So pencils by one of the greats and inks by another DCAU great and Rick Burchett there. So great issue, and it's incredibly iconic. Like, that's a cover that is probably one of the most homaged covers in the modern era. I think you'll see comics that have nothing to do with Batman or Batgirl or Harley Quinn will homage this cover just because it's become so iconic.
Yeah, and it's one that if you have it in your collection, it's well worth taking a look and seeing if you can dig it up and find it, because it's worth quite a bit of pennies depending on its condition. Just checking out some general consensus of what it might be worth. I believe a 9.6 graded version of this comic last sold for about $1,100. So yeah, that's it's quite the piece, and obviously it's been reprinted ad nauseum. So that would be the original Batman Adventures number 12 that we're speaking of directly there. But yeah, technically that is the first appearance of Harley in any sort of printed form. So it's considered that first issue for a character that now, as we mentioned, 30 years old and has risen to such great heights of popularity in popular culture these days. You know, whether probably over the last 5 years, or 5 to 6 years, whenever the Suicide Squad movie came out, the first one, not the Suicide Squad came out. It's probably amongst the top choices for Halloween costumes. It's people that shop at Hot Topic are a big fan, so because of her growing popularity and mainstream recognition now, as is the case with most characters' first appearances in comic book form, that comic book could fetch you a pretty penny. So yeah, check your attic or your basement and see if you have a decent copy, and you might want to look into getting that graded.
Absolutely. Could definitely be an investment. That could be like a down payment on a used car or something. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
And of course, elsewhere in the tie-in books, one other one I'd like to highlight would be Batman Adventures number 28, which was also written by Mr. Puckett with art again by Mr. Burchett and Mr. Parabeck. This is much more of a comedic episode or issue here, as it involves Harley dressing up as a doctor who kind of just looks like Albert Einstein, but he goes by Dr. Heimlich, and she's sort of trying to prove to Batman and some of the other folks at Arkham Asylum that are there that the Joker has changed his ways, and that things have really turned around for him. And of course, the charade is then sort of unfolded, and it doesn't really work out. But it's another quite iconic cover as well, I think, by Mr. Parabeck and Mr. Burchett. There is sort of Harley with her hands clasped, sort of dreaming of a better world, of her and the Joker roasting Batman and some marshmallows over an open fire. It's a pretty great cover as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a memorable one. It's one I didn't even have to think too hard. Once you said 28, I was like, oh, that's the one where Harley's dreaming of them roasting Batman. So yeah, instantly memorable cover. And I think the visual that I remember from that comic is where she lays a kiss right on the Joker while still in full disguise, and the mustache comes off.
Yes,
to the Joker's face, and it's at that point that the jig is up. So that's the thing that I remember most about that comic. It's definitely pretty funny. But yeah, if you have any of the comic book apps, it's certainly worth a read or a review if you've read it before. But certainly an entertaining tale with some good artwork in as well.
That's right, Cal. And of course, if you're talking about famous DCAU tie-in comic books involving Harley Quinn, there's probably none bigger or more important than that, of course, being Mad Love, which, although folks may be more familiar with the new Batman Adventures episode, which we will certainly cover somewhere down the road, we do of course have the original version, which was released as a one-shot Batman Adventures Mad Love #1, and of course written by both Paul Dini and Bruce Timm, with art by with Bruce Timm as well. It's the definitive origin story, which again you've seen replicated in things like the Suicide Squad movies and the cartoon and other cartoon appearances that she's made since then, and the Arkham video games. Like, this is again, we'll probably cover this more in further detail once we've actually covered that episode, and so maybe in a volume 2 for Harley we would cover this in more depth. But everything that came at later, you talk about like the Harley and Ivy pairing, the pretty much that episode is almost a page for page or scene for scene remake of that comic. So it's an incredibly important book, and it was just sort of released at the time as this kind of little fun throwaway origin story for Harley, but it becomes like this ultimate, it becomes her ultimate origin for pretty much every version of the character, no matter how different the character gets, and the design or even the characterization to an extent. It always kind of comes back to that initial origin of her as the psychiatrist, and the Joker kind of twisting and breaking her mind, and ultimately her having this horrific moment where he throws her out of a window, and in the end, and she still goes back to him at the end, or still thinks of him as an angel at the end of the book. So it's an incredibly important piece, and it all kind of starts in this one issue of this standalone Batman story told by two of the most important creators from the series.
Yeah, absolutely. We get the origin of the name. So Harleen Quinzel, Dr. Harleen Quinzel, in fact, and as you mentioned, becomes the defining origin for her in pretty much every medium that we've encountered her in, both in mainstream DC continuity and movies and in live action and in other animated movie universes. It's pretty much all the same. So that all started with that very legendary comic book from the two people that created her, that believe won some awards, or at least it was nominated for some Eisner Awards. And so it's a classic, as you mentioned, adapted later on for the new Batman Adventures, and we'll have a lot of fun once we get to that episode, breaking that down and talking about the differences and similarities between the printed version and the actual animated version. But yeah, hard to move past her printed run in the Batman Adventures Volume 1 without talking about that very, very important one shot. So yeah, great point.
Absolutely, Cal. And as we move on to our sort of final section of these character spotlight episodes, we're going to take a brief look at some, and I stress some because there is an exorbitant amount of Harley Quinn merchandise, specifically Harley Quinn Batman the Animated Series. Even if we just keep it to that, there is quite a few. Of course, like everything else, she has a Funko Pop, but we'll move on. We'll move on from
couple
that.
Variations, no doubt, too.
Oh yes, 100%.
I think there's a blacklight version and stuff. So yeah, lots of Funko merch.
Absolutely, and of course, speaking of her statues, which I don't know, is Funko a statue? I don't know what that is.
It's I don't know. It's a collectible.
Sure. Speaking of the collectibles, we'll move over to statues next. And again, if even just looking at animated DCAU Harley statues, there's so many.
Yep.
So trying to focus on just ones that are appropriate for this volume 1. I looked at the Bruce Timm black and white statue, which is kind of one of the the designer series that the DC director, DC's Collectibles, did for a lot of their characters. In this case, Harley got her own black and white line with several top artists doing their own renditions of her in these black and white statues. And of course, who else but Bruce Timm, of course, had to kick us off in that line.
I will also mention that we did get a version of the original Paul Dini sketch, which
very true.
Speaking of the Batman animated book, which, by the way, somebody recently, I think it was maybe a friend of the show, Jordan Gibson, posted on there or retweeted it on their account that there is a free PDF version of that Batman animated book that you can go check out online and download for free right now from the publisher, I believe. Chip Kidd, I believe, also retweeted it and posted it. So check that out if you have the chance. It's well worth, even if you can't get the physical copy, it's well worth it just for the historical tidbits and interesting factoids from the original Batman animated series. But there is a original sketch that Paul Dini himself did of what he imagined Harley Quinn looking like, and let's just say she looked way different than what she the classic Harley that we know and love, and she looked very much more like I would say like a secretary, like a stuffy secretary from the 1950s with these big sort of goofy beehive sunglasses, and just like a very 50s inspired look that I would say thankfully did not ultimately translate into the character that we ended up with. But it was a very different take. But we did get an homage to Mr. Dini's original sketch with a Harley black and white version of that character in maquette form.
Absolutely. It is a fun bit. Like I said, I think ultimately we can probably all agree that the classic Bruce Timm designed look is the way to go, especially for this DCAU version. But it is fun that her real original design, as sort of dreamed up by Paul Dini in the early days of the series, is it's cool that they were able to immortalize that in statue form. And as mentioned, Bruce Timm also had his take on Harley in black and white, and actually that statue proved so popular that they ended up releasing a colorized version. It's the same pose, same statue basically in every way, except that it is actually in full color, unlike the other ones. So kind of got two releases of the same one there. And actually, speaking of Bruce Timm, he also had a sort of limited run DC Direct statue, very early days DC Direct. It was a 1 of 6,000 statue. It's sort of Harley lounging across like a deck of cards, and it's a really, really cool looking piece. We'll certainly post pictures of these on our Instagram and on our Twitter this week. Follow us at DCAU Review to look at them more. But that's a pretty iconic one, and a lot of those limited edition early days DC Direct statues, some of that stuff that ended up in the Warner Brothers Studio store as well. I'm sure there's some real just incredible craftsmanship and incredible work put into those very limited edition sort of things that sort of went by the wayside because, well, the WB store isn't around anymore. So unless you were fortunate enough to have one in your area at the time that they were a bit more plentiful, you probably maybe you've never even seen this one, but it's a great looking statue.
Yeah, not surprising, some of that early stuff there where modern statues of course are also nice to look at, and some of the detailing and the way that things are done now are a little bit more faithful to artwork a lot of times if you look at it, especially if it's based on a specific artist's rendition. But because of the simplistic nature of Bruce Timm's artwork, I feel like, and the fact that Harley's design was relatively simple back then, it just, multicolored suit with black and white and red, so and nothing too crazy. It was a little bit more easily translated into a 3D form and made that made to look a little bit more faithful than some of the other things at the time. So yeah, it's a nice looking statue and something that, again, if you were able to get your hands on that, it's probably worth a pretty penny these days, as a lot of that early stuff it tends to be.
Absolutely. And then wrapping it up, we'll have a couple smaller mentions for the statues here. Marking the 25th anniversary of Batman the Animated Series, Harley actually got a few nods in statue form. The first one being a bust that is sort of representative of that Joker's Favor appearance where she's in the cop uniform. You also have like an interchangeable head where you have the jester head to perhaps make her a bit more recognizable, but a fun throwback to her first appearance as well. And then maybe more visually memorable is another 25th anniversary special, which is it's Harley sort of sitting. Batman is tied up and has like a giant red bow tie around his neck, and has a little happy anniversary tag around the bow tie, and Harley is sort of sitting on his back. And you actually have a little Harley Quinn 25 statue or logo at the base of the statue as well. So some pretty iconic takes, as mentioned at the top by Cal, as well as it being Batman the Animated Series 25th anniversary at the time. It also, of course, was Harley's at the time. So her, not surprising to see her get some extra love with all of that BTAS 25 merch that was making the rounds at the time.
Yep, forever linked together. So Batman the Animated Series will always have to share its birthday cake, so proverbial birthday cake. So with and slightly, I guess in the future, who knows, 50 years from now, whenever now is, It could be that that Batman the Animated Series is more of a footnote, and that Harley ends up getting Harley Quinn Day, sort of the way that some of the tentpole characters have been celebrated by DC Comics proper. The last one that I'll mention that statue wise that stuck out to me that I'm remembering also comes from that Batman animated book. There was a ceramic statue. I think it was a DC. I want to say Warner statue. Also, it's like a little ceramic statue of her, and she's kind of gesturing with her finger towards you. And the way that it's set up in the book is they have this, she's kind of got her hand behind her back and she's gesturing. And on the one page, they kind of have that and she's smiling sort of devilishly. And then you turn the page and they show the back of the statue and she's got this a classic cartoony looking bomb behind her that's lit. So just, I love that because that sticks out to me as sort of the, the comedic nature and the cartoony nature of the character. But that book is so iconic and there's so much about that book that sticks out in my memory that that one statue also is also probably worth some pennies these days too, if you have one of those.
Absolutely. That's a great one. That's again, that can't recommend that animated book again. Really exciting that it's available for more people to see online now. But yeah, that's an iconic one as well. And again, there's many more, including ones that are tied to specific episodes that we'll cover, like Mad Love, like Harley's Holiday, certainly ones that we'll cover in a volume 2 of this character spotlight on Harley. But before we get out of here, we of course have to touch a little bit on her action figure appearances. And it's interesting, there aren't that many female characters in a lot of boys, what are considered quote unquote boys toy lines of that era. Mm-hmm. But the female rogues gallery pretty well represented in the Batman the Animated Series line. Catwoman, Poison Ivy getting figures in that original Kenner line, as well as of course Harley Quinn with some pretty cool accessories as well.
Yeah, she gets a little boxing glove gun that you can stick on her arm, and it's a pretty fantastic likeness. Some of the female figures in that Kenner and ultimately the Hasbro run were, I would say, less than faithful to the TV design. So, or what you had seen on TV. And again, maybe it's just the simplicity of the actual Bruce Timm design and the costume. But I feel like that character is pretty spot on. And that figure comes, I think that's from the Batman, the adventure. It's technically the Adventures of Batman and Robin series Duo Force, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that Harley is a nice representation of that figure. And as you mentioned, that whole line did a pretty good job of getting some female figures out when they could. So having a character, the only miscarriage of justice in my mind is that it took so long. That's probably 5 or 6 series into the run there, that a character that was pretty prominent ultimately did not get a better distribution deal there early on. But I guess it's a testimony to the popularity of the character, and that character maybe wasn't thought of as being as prominent as a Poison Ivy or a Catwoman, who ultimately were both either about to be featured in live action movies or had already been pretty famously featured in live action. So yeah, we get a Harley figure there, and it's I think it stands the test of time. It's a great figure, a great representation, and one that if you can get it, you can still get them for, I would say, relatively cheap. I don't know, the market for like rookie figures hasn't really taken off the way it has for comic book first appearances or rookie cards, but you may want to consider that as an investment, since that was her first action figure, in case that market ever does begin to sort of form. Absolutely. Yeah. I actually have been eyeing one. There's one at my local comic store that's been sitting there for a while, and it's not particularly expensive. So I've been kind of thinking it would be fun to get that, just because again, it's the first one. So it's kind of fun to mark the occasions for things like that sometimes, even if it isn't necessarily the most financially rewarding, like those like that comic we were talking about earlier. But moving on from there, it was a little bit of a drought for more DCAU Harley figures, at least ones based on the original Batman the Animated Series design. But thankfully,
DC Direct and DC Collectibles ended that drought in the 2010s with not only a solo release with some fun accessories. This Harley figure has been re-released quite a few times. And also, of course, she was one of the characters, along with Batman and the Joker, to get what is known as the Expressions Pack, which not only came with a bunch of interchangeable heads with, as you guessed it, different facial expressions, but also comes with Bud and Lou, the hyenas, also included with that set. So those DC Direct and collectible figures really, I mean, they knocked it out of the park with 90% of those. I think there's a few that I think not this Harley figure. I think there's a few in the Bat family side of things that aren't great, but the Harley figures in that DC Direct line pretty great.
Yeah, I concur. It's pretty much a home run. Again, very, very well representative of the original design and what you see on screen. As you mentioned, her accessories, she comes with a Joker fish, which is great, and she also comes with her pop gun, which is fantastic with a standard release. We also did get a, hard to tell whether or not it's based on the new Batman Adventures episode directly, because it comes with a comic book and the Joker figure with it is based on the Batman the Animated Series look. But there was a Joker and Harley 2-pack that was packaged with a copy of Mad Love, and she's sort of in her negligee, famously from Hey, you want to don't you want to rev up your Harley line? So you have that, and then as you mentioned, the Expressions pack that not only come with Bud and Lou, but she's got some roller skates that are later featured in the Harley's Holiday episode. She comes with a bazooka with a boxing glove on the end of it, and then as you mentioned, multiple of those classic Harley expressions, which were her signature looks from the episodes, and also the aforementioned half fish suit, complete with the eyes sticking out of it. So you can recreate your favorite scene from the Laughing Fish as well. So yeah, that whole series was done so incredibly well, and that figure is also included in that it was done really well. And then ultimately, I think it was last released one last time in the Batman the Adventures Continue line that had some cell shading on it, and came with the Harley Quinn grappling hook, I think, that she uses in the Harley's Holiday. It's either Harley Quinn 8 or the Harley's Holiday episode that she uses it in, that has a Joker head on it. So there's some great different versions of that character, plenty of them out there. I think the Expressions pack is probably the most expensive of that set, so if you're looking to get that, you may want to save your pennies. Last I checked, it was a couple $100, so not easy to come by, and a little expensive, but you can get yourself one of those if you're looking to for relatively cheap. Especially the latest iteration of that is probably still available on Amazon or most toy store sites. So yeah, those are some great versions of that character. And while we haven't had a lot of representations, it's almost like you've had the defining versions of those characters done so well, you almost don't need another version unless you're talking about a different scale, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I mean, McFarlane in their main sort of retail DC multiverse line did do it's not officially a Batman the Animated Series Harley, but it's referred to as Classic Harley, and has a very cartoonish face. But I think if you're looking for something in that scale, you're probably just going to look at one of the versions of the DC Direct line that was just really nailed the likeness and everything from the series.
Yeah, I will say also, collectors were teased a little bit this year at San Diego Comic-Con by Mondo, who is responsible for some really fantastic 1/6 vinyl figures based on Batman the Animated Series. They started with a Batman, and then did a Mr. Freeze, and then followed that up with a Catwoman, and they are just launched their Joker version of that figure also. And these are expensive collectibles, designer collectibles, I would say. 1/6 size, so a little over 12 inches, or yeah, probably run 13 or 14 inches tall. Come with stands and multiple heads and hands and different expressions, and they're exclusive versions that you can get only through Mondo, and then their retailers sell them in sort of a standard version. But they did tease at San Diego Comic-Con a Harley Quinn is coming for that series, likely I would assume in the next year or so. But yeah, that as far as different scales, if you're looking for a 5-inch tall to go with your classic Kenner figures, you really only need the one. If you're looking for your 6 to 7 inch with the DC director collectibles set, you have your one that you really need. And then if you're going anything else, you probably are looking at different scaling if you're looking to have something to join your collection, because pretty much everything else has been really defined. Yeah, Liam, so I guess that will begin to wrap us up here, at least for volume 1 of Harley Quinn's DCAU character spotlight. If we missed anything, feel free to tweet us at DCAU Review. I'm sure there might be one or two things that we maybe a mention or a brief cameo that we may have forgotten to mention, but yeah, that's at least for the first season, and then the Batman the Animated Series merchandise that we covered. Feel free to tweet us with your favorite merchandise. If you have a particular Harley Quinn piece that you enjoy, tweet us at DCAU Review, or leave us a comment on Instagram at DCAU Review. We invite you, of course, to subscribe to our podcast. You can check out, as we mentioned, all of the episodes that we've reviewed thus far that we mentioned on this episode, as well as our entire catalog, both at DCAUreview.com, on your favorite podcast app, and at the youtube.com/The Pod Tower, which of course features not only coverage from us and on all of our reviews, but also features some reviews, and I'm sure some discussions on Harley Quinn from some other great content creators and our pals at the Watchtower Database and Tim Talk. So check that out as well. Subscribe to that if you will. If you wish to support the podcast, subscribing to us on your podcast app or subscribing to us on that YouTube channel helps a lot. Liking our videos, leaving 5-star reviews on your podcast app takes a little bit of time, but helps us a lot. And of course, if you want to support us monetarily, you have a couple different ways you can do that. You can buy a piece of merchandise, head over to DCAUreview.com, click on the merch tab. You can also use the link on our Anchor site, anchor.fm, or the link that's posted, I believe, on all of our other subscriptions. No matter what podcast app, you can check out the Anchor link there and support us directly if you so choose to. But yeah, Liam, we are surprisingly coming to the end here of a great month, honoring this landmark, not only character in Harley Quinn, but the Batman the Animated Series 30th anniversary itself. But when it comes to Batman the Animated Series, and this is the foundation of what we do here, I don't think 1 month is enough. But I also think that we can't simply just keep going forward without taking a look at the past. What do you think, Liam?
I think that's a wonderful idea, Cal. Yeah, as we begin to look forward to what we'll be doing in October, we're kind of doing something a bit more experimental here. We've been doing our show for quite a few years now, and the show has evolved a little bit as far as how we talk about these shows, the amount of detail we go into, the amount of credit given to the people working on the shows, I think was lacking in those earliest episodes. So we thought it would be fun to kind of do a re-review, if you will, in honor of the 30th anniversary of some of those iconic early episodes that we covered very early on in our own show and maybe didn't give the proper attention to detail that those episodes deserved.
That's right, Liam. So we will be doing a sort of a greatest hits. We'll be having some special guests join us in reviewing some of those episodes that we tackled very early on. But this gives us an opportunity, as you mentioned, to take a look in depth at some of the areas maybe that we glossed over. It also for some of our newer listeners that that haven't checked out those earlier episodes or have put themselves through some of the torture of listening to us as we were still finding our feet and discovering sort of our back and forth and how we would format the podcast. This gives you an opportunity without having to scroll too far to hear our thoughts on some of these classic episodes. So yeah, we will be kicking things off with the first week in October as we turn the calendar page with what else, Liam, but the very first episode of Batman the Animated Series. And I don't think we'll be revising our scores very much. We may look and figure out if we still agree with our original scores, but I don't know that we'll be doing revisions necessarily. But as we said, we'll be inviting some of our friends and guests along the way to join us in some of our reviews. So we look forward to getting some other opinions on these classic episodes and checking back in to see where we stand as far as whether or not we still agree with ourselves or not, based on what we thought maybe 5 years ago as we come up on our own 5th anniversary of doing this podcast.
That's right. Yeah, I think it'll be fun to get some alternative appearances, maybe add a little meat to the bone. Like we said, these are not repeats. We are not just putting the old episodes into the new slot. We are going to watch these again and kind of look at them on a little bit of a deeper level than we did in our original reviews. And hopefully we'll get to have some fun friends along for the ride, and we'll have a good time with it.
Absolutely. I can't wait to do that. We've been kicking around this idea for a little bit, and we look forward to hearing some feedback from you and the listeners on how you enjoy this. So feel free to make your voice heard at DCAU Review on Twitter. But very excited to do that, Liam, starting next week. Cannot wait. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.